Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, for today's episode, folks, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We've been talking about, understanding salary cap. We've been talking about, certain players. But in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a certain player, but we're going to be talking about it from a different perspective than a typical one. What exactly am I referring to? Well, let's understand that in the NFL, players are expected that they are to continually grow and progress. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie that's just first coming into the NFL, or if you're a 10-year vet and you've been doing it forever and a day. You're expected to continually grow, you're expected to continually progress, to continually get better. And that is pretty much what I'm saying here, is there is expected to be continual development. You should not be resting on your laurels, you should be continually trying to get better in something. And some players, they do better at this or faster at this than others. And the players that I'm talking about there, they typically are the ones that show out, they start, they become household names, they become stars because they're constantly trying to get better. They're constantly trying to be a better version or rendition than they were previously, whether it's the previous year, the previous month, week, day, whatever the case might be. However, some players, for whatever reason, they just don't develop the same way as what I was just referring to. They sometimes are very slow developing, sometimes they don't develop the way you want them to at all, and it's simply because of this lack of development or this slow development, it starts putting teams and organizations into positions where they have to question whether that particular player is ever going to show the potential that they envisioned when they acquired them. And I'm going to say this right now. No team is perfect at this. No team can ever say that they have not had such a player. Not even the Lions. Because despite the Lions' excellent record of developing players over the last few years, there have been a few that fall into this category. There are currently, at least in my opinion, 2 players that fall directly into this category. One player that directly falls into it is defensive tackle Broderick Martin. This is a guy that when we drafted him, a lot of people had expectations that it's like, okay, we expect this guy to develop, and we expect him to develop quickly because when we drafted him in the 3rd round, we gave up a lot of compensation to get him. We gave up a lot of draft capital to get him. And so it was like, okay, if Brad Holmes is giving up a lot of capital to get this guy, the expectation is he should develop quickly. We should start seeing him on the field. But the problem is that Brad Holmes, being the kind of GM that he is, he never simply rests on his laurels. He never just relies on one particular person or player. He will make sure that there are other options. He will make sure that there's competition. He will make sure that there's never an instance where a player has to play because, well, they're the best we got. And it's because of that competition that Broderick Martin, at least in one part of the sense, has not had really a chance to demonstrate very well said growth. And while we have seen sporadic spurts, we've seen sporadic flashes when he has been on the field, the problem is that when he's not on the field and he's at practice or when he's been in training camp, the progression in the development has not been as good as a lot of people are wanting, and that's why we haven't seen him as much as well. And because of Broderick Martin's situation, I know there's a lot of people that are like, dude, this guy's a bum, he's a bust, we gave up way too much for him, we should move on. But Broderick Martin's problem is that he's buried on a depth chart. And because of that, he's not getting as many opportunities as, say, somebody else who's like, okay, the depth chart is only like maybe 2 or 3 guys, and there's definitely opportunities for that player to show themselves. There's definitely opportunities for that player to, put it out on the field and say, hey, this guy's really making development. This guy's really actually in a position to take that next step. And that's why for this other player that we're about to talk about, that's where this becomes a much bigger problem. That's where this becomes a much bigger headache. And the player I'm specifically talking about is quarterback Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker is a guy that ever since we made the decision to acquire him back in 2023, I've always had a reservation about him. And that has put me at odds with some people because I know for a fact that when we drafted him, there were people that were like, oh, this guy's going to be the QB of the future. Jared Goff's time here is done. Blah, 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 blah. Hooker is going to be the next guy that's going to be the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. And I kept trying to tell people multiple times, it's like, listen, that's not going to happen. I don't know what universe you're thinking you're in. I don't know what kind of player you think Hooker is, but it's not going to happen. And because of those expectations that some people have had since Hendon Hooker has come in, I'm just going to call for what it is. I'm going to call a spade a spade. His career has been largely disappointing, and it's been underwhelming because of that fanfare that he had when he came into the draft and when the Lions drafted him. Because let's go back to that draft. When Hooker came into the NFL draft in 2023, there were some people that thought he should be a first-round draft pick. There were some people that thought, hey, due to what he did at Tennessee, due to the talent and the production that he did there, he should be a first-round draft pick. There should be teams that would like to have him as their quarterback of the future, that would like to have him as the guy that they're going to invest in. But the problem is no team bit. No team took the opportunity to make Hendon Hooker that kind of a player. And so the reason why this kind of, career arc of Hendon Hooker has been kind of the way it has been is because of, one, the narrative that was surrounding him when he came into the draft, but then the narrative that instantaneously got started when he got drafted by the Lions in the 3rd round. Because when Hooker got drafted in the 3rd round, there were 2 narratives that instantaneously got started. The first was that, the Lions are getting a steal. They're getting a guy who has all this talent. He has all this upside. This is a guy who can be a quarterback for a team, can be a franchise quarterback, and you just got him in the 3rd round. There were a lot of people who thought the Lions just looked like geniuses with that. That was the first narrative. The second narrative was that people thought that the Lions, as I said, had drafted their quarterback of the future. And they're like, okay, Hendon Hooker, he's going to maybe take a year or 2 to develop, and then, boom, Lions are going to make him their quarterback. Because at the time, there were still people that are saying, oh, you know what? Well, Jared Goff's had 2 good years, but you don't really know if the Lions are fully invested in him. You don't know if you can expect this continuing, production out of Jared Goff. So it's good to have a guy that you can groom to take over for him. But, as I said back then, I've been saying for now going on 2+ years, that idea, those narratives at the time that I'm talking about here, they have not come true. And in fact, they have been, as I predicted, horrendously erroneous. For all the talent that Hooker displayed while he was at Tennessee, his development has been absolutely slow. It has been painstakingly slow. Albeit, it's been consistent, but still ridiculously slow, like molasses in winter slow. Hooker has never come close to being considered the Lions quarterback of the future, nor has he ever come close to pushing Jared Goff for being the starting quarterback. That's just never come anywhere into the conversation. It might as well be East is from the West. The two never touch. That has been how far apart the conversation has been as far as where Jared Goff is versus where Hendon Hooker is and where the team is thinking he's going to be. And the view that many had of his value as a 3rd round draft pick for a guy who could have gone in the 1st round, that whole narrative, it's vastly eroded. Like, it's eroded into oblivion. So much so that there are now people, even Lions fans, who once used to think of him as the guy that would replace Goff. There are now people that are saying, man, Hendon Hooker, wasted pick. And now there are even some that are taking it a step further than that. They're now trying to put a bust label on him, which I think is kind of a little bit ridiculous because typically you can only reserve a bust label for a guy that's in the first or the second round. Third round's a mid-round pick. Those are guys that could potentially become something, but you're not banking on it. So unless it's a first or second round pick, I don't call it a bust. I just call it like, hey, you know what? This just didn't work out. And the reasoning for the change in perception, it's been very well documented with Hendon Hooker over the last couple of years. And let's take a look at that. When you take a look at Hendon Hooker, again, probably the biggest issue that has come to light with him is that he has been unable to effectively seize and hold on to the number 2 quarterback job. Because let's think about it here. Apart from his rookie season, when he came in 2023, which largely he couldn't play for because, well, he was still recovering from an ACL injury that he had on a non-contact injury while he was in college, Hooker's not really been able to clearly distinguish himself as a clear number 2 quarterback for the Lions, despite having great mentors in both Jared Goff and Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, Goff was a number 1 overall pick back in the 2016 draft. Teddy Bridgewater was a first-round draft pick and used to be the starter for the Vikings and has had multiple years of starting experience in the NFL. And both of those guys have been there to help and have been there to give, Hendon Hooker, pointers, tips, how to be a better professional, how to be a better quarterback. But despite all that, he just has not shown the progression to really cement himself as a number 2 quarterback. And when you move off of the rookie season he was in the 2024 season, yeah, he was able to beat out Nate Sudfeld, but, well, let's call it what it is. That's not exactly a great accomplishment. Nate Sudfeld is not a guy you want as your number 2 quarterback. He's a guy that you settle for when you really don't have a better option. And I've said this before multiple times. Sometimes trying to find a quality backup quarterback is almost as hard as trying to find a starting quarterback. And the problem is that, yeah, you know what? Hendon Hooker beat out Nate Sudfeld, which, yeah, that's still good. He was able to establish that he was better than Nate Sudfeld. But again, Nate Sudfeld has never been a guy that teams are going to be like, yeah, you know what? We really want you as our number 2 quarterback because we think that if worst comes to worst, we can rely on you to lead our team for a couple of weeks or potentially longer. And Hooker has just not been able to do that. Because the perfect example I can give is go back to the end of the 2024 season. Teddy Bridgewater, he comes out of retirement after, he had led his high school team to a state championship, made a promise that if they got there and they won, he would come back out of retirement and he would go play for the Lions. As soon as that happened, despite the fact that Hendon Hooker had been the number 2 quarterback the entirety of the season, Hooker was automatically demoted to quarterback number 3. Like, it wasn't even up for debate. As soon as Teddy Bridgewater came back, he's going right down to quarterback number 3. No question. Even though he'd been the backup the entirety of the season. And then what further solidified this was then that when we got to the divisional round and Goff got hit on that illegal play after the interception and he had to go out for a concussion evaluation, the Lions did not put in Hendon Hooker. They put in Teddy Bridgewater. And a lot of people looked at that move as, oh, the Lions have absolutely no trust in Hendon Hooker. They have absolutely no belief that he's a better option than Teddy Bridgewater. Now, at the time when it happened, I was like, listen, you have to understand the dynamic of the situation. It's a divisional playoff game. You want a guy who's had the experience of being in the playoffs, who knows what to do. Teddy Bridgewater fits that, like, absolutely perfectly. Because let's call it for what it is. Hendon Hooker has had very, very little actual experience playing in the NFL against NFL defenses. He's had, maybe a couple of snaps here or there when the Lions are up 40-14 or something like that. So it's not like Hendon Hooker has gone up against the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop of NFL defenses. It's not even close. And trying to put a guy into a situation where it's the playoffs, you're going to get the best of the best that a team can offer, that just wouldn't have been smart. But still, the point of the matter is that it's like, okay, you're going into the playoffs, a guy that has not been playing the entirety of the season comes back and you instantaneously get demoted. That's a major red flag. And that just showed and still shows the shaky position that Hooker has when it comes to the whole quarterback depth chart. Because those two moves, they showed massive red flags as far as where Hendon Hooker is in terms of his development. And it has these massive major questions about whether or not his development can be trusted to get to a point to where the Lions can actually rely on him. And then the second thing that's a big issue is that the Lions, despite the fact that Hooker's been with the team now going into his third season, they still are wanting to have quality competition at that backup quarterback spot. And I know that this is going to sound a little bit tongue-in-cheek and it's going to sound like I'm talking out one side of my face and the other, but understand where I'm going with this. One would think that for Hendon Hooker, after being in the NFL for 2 full seasons, he's now coming into his 3rd training camp, that he would have shown more development at this point and would have given more to the Lions to show that, hey, you know what? An open competition is not necessarily needed for him, especially after all the years he spent in the NCAA as a starting quarterback. Because, yeah, he was a starter at Tennessee. He was a starter at, Virginia Tech. This is a guy who spent, 5 or 6 years in the NCAA. He had more experience coming out of college than a lot of quarterbacks had. But yet, that's not what's going on here. The Lions have made it abundantly clear that they still want to have open competition for that number 2 quarterback spot. Now, again, this is where the part of talking out on one side of my face and the other kind of comes into place. Yes, we know the Lions want competition. They want competition to bring out the best in players. They want competition so that way they know exactly what's going on when it comes to their players, knowing where they're at, knowing how to evaluate them properly. But the problem is that for all of Hooker's talent, for all the time that he has spent with the Lions, all the time he's been under Goff, he's worked with Bridgewater, the fact of the matter is the Lions didn't just bring in somebody to compete with him just to push him. They brought someone in to genuinely compete for the number 2 job, and that's quarterback Kyle Allen. And let's call it for what it is. If we're going to just do a straight-up comparison of Kyle Allen to Hendon Hooker, it's not a comparison. I'm not even going to try and kid myself there. And when you actually start looking at the background of these 2 players, it gets even worse. Let's go back to when Kyle Allen was coming out of college, which was in 2016. That was the last year he was in college. So he came out in the 2017 draft. When Kyle Allen left college, he had just barely over 61.5% completion rate, almost 4,300 passing yards, 7.4 an average a throw, 37 touchdowns to 18 interceptions, which is like a maybe 2-to-1 ratio. And he had an NFL passer rating coming into the NFL, because I don't really go very well with what college passer ratings are. I prefer the NFL passer rating. It was a 92.6. So pretty much what Kyle Allen showed is coming out of college, he was an average guy. He wasn't a guy that you should expect to be a franchise savior or a franchise quarterback, but you could rely on him to get the job done if needed. Whereas, if you take a look at what Hendon Hooker was coming out of college, after, again, being in college from 2018 to 2022, which, let's understand something here, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that's 5 years. 5 years he was in college. He left college with almost a 67 completion percentage rate, way above Kyle Allen, almost 9,000 yards of passing, 9.5 an average a throw, 80 passing touchdowns to only 12 interceptions, and had a NFL quarterback rating. If you do the, if you do the comparison, or you do the moving it off of the NCAA passer rating of a 120.4, it's not even a contest. Hendon Hooker was a much better prospect coming out of college than Kyle Allen was. Not even close. I mean, for crying out loud, in 2022, Hendon Hooker was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. That was part of the reason why a lot of people thought, hey, you know what? Despite the fact he's got an injury, this guy could be a first-round draft talent. So, like I just said, from a college perspective, Kyle Allen shouldn't even stand a chance against Hendon Hooker, especially considering that Hendon Hooker is also way more athletically gifted than Kyle Allen. But yet, despite that, Hooker has had barely any professional regular season experience compared to Allen. And let's furthermore put this into perspective as well. Hendon Hooker has never started a game in the NFL as a regular season quarterback, whereas Kyle Allen has 19 different starts over his entire time in the NFL. So wait a minute here. Kyle Allen not only has more NFL experience just from being in the NFL longer, which I wouldn't necessarily weigh that too much against Hendon Hooker, but the fact that Allen has started almost 20 games in the NFL, whereas Hendon Hooker has not started any, that's a massive leg up for Kyle Allen. Even despite the fact that Hendon Hooker absolutely just completely wallops him, just cleans the floor with him when it comes to the whole college comparison. And the point is that this just isn't a competition to get Hendon Hooker to be a better quarterback and thus ready for the quarterback job behind Goff. This is an open competition where Allen has a very likely shot of actually becoming quarterback number 2 for the Lions for several reasons. As I just stated, plenty of NFL experience. The guy's been in the NFL since 2017, so 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. He's got 9 years of NFL experience. As I just also stated, Kyle Allen has started almost 20 games in the NFL as a quarterback. And on top of that, if you take a look at the teams that Kyle Allen has been on, he's backed up for 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Yes, I understand that if you go back to Pittsburgh last year with Russell Wilson is no longer playing at a Hall of Fame level. But when the guy retires, he's going into the Hall of Fame. There's no debate on that. And then, that's right, the year before that, he was in Buffalo backing up Josh Allen. Josh Allen is likely going to go into the Hall of Fame when his career is all said and done. And then on top of that, Kyle Allen has played in multiple NFL offenses. He understands how to pick up on offensive language much quicker. He understands how to look at different offensive concepts quicker, defensive concepts quicker. He just has way more experience and understanding of how to be a quarterback than Hendon Hooker does. And for me, that's just like, okay, here, this is kind of interesting. And then there's one final reason why Kyle Allen has a decent shot of winning the job. Because Kyle Allen is not Nate Sudfeld. Kyle Allen is better than Nate Sudfeld all day, twice on Sunday. And the only guy that Hendon Hooker has beaten out of, training camp to get that number 2 job was Nate Sudfeld. So it's like, okay here, this is not just a competition for Hooker to get better. This is a competition where Hooker could not actually win the job because Kyle Allen has a lot of things going for him. Yes, Hooker is more, athletic. He's been with the Lions for the last couple of years, but Kyle Allen is coming into this and it's like, dude, he's been doing this his entire life almost, and he's had multiple years of experience of coming into new situations and picking up offenses rather quickly. And then you have to think about the other side of this. Going back to Hooker's developmental problems, Hooker still has shown that he has issues with accuracy and ball placement. The one thing you can't have as a quarterback is accuracy issues. That just does not work. Because, I'm sorry, there are certain quarterbacks that have come into the NFL, they might have all the athletic talent in the world. They might be able to run like a gazelle. They might have the power to run like a freaking tank. They might have an arm that can be a cannon that can throw the ball 70 freaking yards down the field, a.k.a. Anthony Richardson. But the problem is that that's not going to cut it on an NFL level. It just isn't. Part of the reason why the freaking Colts decided to bring in Daniel Jones, and now it's like, okay, here, what the thunder's going on there? And then on top of that, despite the fact that Hooker has been with the Lions the last couple of years, he still has not fully grasped the offense. And let's put this into further perspective. With a new offensive coordinator who, by the way, is going to keep the offense mostly the same, he's going to call things differently. The language is going to be different. Understanding what he's looking for out of the quarterback, it's going to be different. So that right there puts Allen and Hooker on a much more level playing field than all the other advantages that I just talked about with Hooker being there the last couple of years, and the fact that he's more athletically gifted. The ultimate point is if Hooker cannot convincingly beat out Allen in this training camp and, preseason, and is, again, regulated or relegated to the quarterback 3 spot, I mean, someone has to start seriously having a conversation if he will ever be able to be the Lions' official answer at quarterback number 2. And if 2025 might actually be the beginning of the end for his Lions career. Because it's like, listen, the Lions at this point, they're coming into a situation where they're going to have to start reevaluating players that are on their roster. They're going to have to start looking at players and say, hey, is it actually beneficial to keep you here, or do we need to move on and find somebody who's better suited for what we're looking for? And again, I'm not saying anything negative about Hendon Hooker, but the facts be the facts, and the evidence is actually, pretty factually clear. Hendon Hooker, because of his slow development, he's putting himself into a really, really, kind of tricky spot here where it's like, listen, your time's running out, buddy. You have to step up and show something, otherwise you might be having to play somewhere else. And then other people are going to have to start asking, well, if you could make it work with the Lions, where in the thunder do you think you're going to work? So these are all questions that are coming into, a field of view when we're talking about Hendon Hooker here. And it's like, okay, that's why this whole training camp period that's coming up, the mini camp and also preseason, it's like, this is a really big one for freaking, for Hendon Hooker, because it's like, listen, Kyle Allen is going to be probably the best quarterback that he's gone up against, because it's like, listen, with Teddy Bridgewater, it wasn't really a competition. Teddy Bridgewater was going to be the backup quarterback no matter what. And like I said, Kyle Allen is way better than Nate Sudfeld. So it's like, listen, this is an open competition through and through, and Hendon Hooker has really got to show if he can actually be that number 2 quarterback. Otherwise, like I said, there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable questions that are going to start being hurled his way. And it's like, I don't know if the Lions are going to be able to answer them other than saying, well, we're still confident in him, we're still seeing progress. But it's like, at what point does saying, oh, we're still seeing progress actually, translate into, yes, the progression has actually gotten to a point where we feel comfortable with him being the number 2 quarterback should something happen to Goff. That's where this is becoming a bit of an issue for him. And it's where it's becoming a bit of a sticky position for the Lions. But anyway, I know some people are not going to like to hear this because they think I'm too harsh on Hendon Hooker, but it's like, listen, I'm a realist. I'm a realist, and I deal with what the reality of the situation is. And quarterbacks, their shelf life in the NFL, if they can show that they can play and they can actually be quality players no matter where they go, they have a long shelf life. I mean, for crying out loud, look at guys like Kyle Allen, Chase Daniels, and other guys, Joe Flacco even. It's like, hey, even though he's no longer a starting level quarterback, this guy's playing into his 40s, and he's still able to get jobs in multiple places. But Hendon Hooker has not shown that just yet. So it's like, listen, this is a situation where Hendon Hooker has really got to step out, and he's really got to show, yes, I'm ready to take that next step. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of questions that, people are going to have are going to start having with him. And it's going to get rather interesting. But anyway, I know some people are going to be okay with this kind of content. Others are going to be like, oh, you're just being a hater on Hendon Hooker. You've always been a hater on Hendon Hooker. And it's like, listen, I'm not a hater. Like I said, I'm a realist. But having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content I push out. Also encourage y'all to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you possibly can. The more we do that, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this content. Hope you all found something interesting about this content. Maybe it was able to give you a new perspective, a different way to think about it. That's what I try to do with every piece that I make. I also hope everyone has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.